One of the great things about working with our own plugin is that we get to see how functions actually work. I hope you've all taken the time to do that. But more importantly, we've also seen how individual class names are important when adding elements to our WordPress site. In order for us to be able to effectively style our classes with CSS, they need to be individual and not conflict with anything else on our WordPress site. Otherwise, if you change the custom attributes of a title here, then they would affect everything else on your WordPress page, and that's likely not what you're going for. So as you notice, I have my contact form here loaded currently in the Site Origin CSS editor, and I'm doing that so that I can see if all of my fields are correctly named. You'll notice if I click on my header, down here I am at MCH2, which is what I've decided to name my class. That stands for Michael Contact H2. I can also click on the individual fields and see I have MC Input 1. I can click down here and see I have MC Text. So it looks like everything is working well. All of the fields are named individually the way they're supposed to be. So if I wanted to use the Site Origin CSS editor to style my contact form, I could, but it doesn't give us that much control. My theme doesn't give me the ability to change too much with my contact form, but I can do things with the Site Origin CSS like change the background color of my form. I can click on individual field names and change their background colors. However, I want to be able to do a lot more than this. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of the Custom CSS tool, and we're going to go ahead and go back to the Edit CSS or Additional CSS tool that you'll find under the Appearance menu or in the Customizer. So here again is my contact form. You'll see that it is basic and generic. I haven't done anything to it yet. And of course here we have to have some CSS to start with. Now in a previous assignment we learned how to style our widgets, add a box to it, and change some of the attributes. So I'm going to go ahead and use that same code here. So as you see, I have my generic class name here, which was what the PHP input areas were set at before we changed them. And the code here gives me control over padding, which is the spacing of text within a certain area. I've also added the margin attributes, which I got from the W3 Schools website. W3 Schools is a great research tool for being able to find out what different HTML and CSS tags do. And we still have the border capability and my border radius and my background color. So let's see what we can do with this. So first of all, I'd like to change my header. So my header here is kind of stuck between my map and the contact form itself. So I'm going to go ahead and enter MCH2. As you can see, the default settings that I have are now controlling my MCH2 area. I have a basic border, I've got a radius here, and you see that the padding is what dictates where the text appears in the box. So depending on how big I make the padding, that's how I can center my text. And I can change both the right padding and the left padding and make sure that it appears where I want it to on the different platforms. Now I also want to change the margin. I've got a very large box here, so I'm currently set to 0 pixels all around for my bottom margin, my top margin, and my right and left margins. So I can change those things, and I can give myself a little bit more space, a little bit more separation from the rest of the content. So I've already got a little bit of control here. I'm going to go ahead and change my left padding to, let's say 40. Now I can control individual attributes based on the class names, or I can actually control multiples in the same CSS. So if I wanted to change my MC text area to have the same attributes as my header, I can do that. You'll notice though that when I change the padding of the text in my header here, I'm also changing the padding of the text in my message here. So I don't want to do that. So I can use individual code areas to control individual sections on my contact form. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that in here again. So this time I'm going to do MC text, because I want to be able to control this area separately. Whoops, not MX text, MC text. Okay, so now I have that same border, and I have the text where I want it, a little bit more justified to the left. I can actually change my padding to 10 and just inset it a little bit so it doesn't look too crowded in here. I'd also like to do something like change the background colors. I don't necessarily want all of this white space, and it doesn't really differentiate my contact form from the different sections of my page. So I've included the HTML color picker URL, which is in the module, and the color picker is a great tool. It's also on W3 Schools. I can scroll through the page to look for different color areas, or I can change my colors here and find out which color palette I want to use. Let's go ahead and start with a light blue. So I can click on any of these and I can get the RGB colors. So I can copy that over to my custom CSS. I can change the RGB of my background color attribute. So now I've got a light blue here, and I want to change the color attribute of my text area as well. So I'm going to give it a light blue here. Okay, so now this sets it apart a little bit from the rest of my content. Now I'm also going to style my input boxes, because I want my input area to have a nice gray background so that people know that they can type there. So I can copy here. Now hopefully they'd already know they could type there, but I like to give it a little bit more class. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my color picker once again, and this time I'm going to choose, because I'm going to stick with a pastel theme for now, I'll do a nice light purple. Now obviously this doesn't match my theme, and you would want to choose colors that match the theme, but just for demonstration purposes we're going to make these nice and contrasting of each other. Oh, I need to change my class name to MC Input 1. And now I have a nice light purple or pink color. Now everything's starting to stand out a little bit with my contact form, but I actually want to go ahead and separate the contact form completely from the rest of my page. So I'm going to use the MC Form attribute that I created, and you all created one of your own. You have a different name for it. And go ahead and change the background color of this as well. Let's go for a nice green. Keep that pastel theme going. So I'll click on this one, and I've got my RGB colors here. Go to my customizer, and oops, make sure you're not deleting the brackets. And now my entire form has its own style, and I can change the distance of the header from the rest of my form simply by changing the margins. So I can change my margin bottom to 10 pixels and stand it off a little bit. I can change my margin right to 10 pixels or 50 pixels, so that it definitely has its own space and has its own area, so that it stands as a title rather than kind of being absorbed in the rest of my form. You can also go in and use the same attributes that you use to make your header look a little bit different into making your actual form smaller or larger depending on the size of your page and depending on how much space it takes up. Once again, just go ahead and choose that margin attribute, and I can change my right margin and my left margin, and I can make it a significantly smaller form so it doesn't take up so much space. And depending on the look and feel of your site, you could actually make this small enough to fit into a widget in your footer or fit into a widget on your sidebar. So for this week, I invite you to be creative. I invite you to take your contact form and customize it, make it your own. Add some borders around the boxes, around the text input fields. Feel free to go to W3 Schools and do a little bit of looking and see what you can learn other than changing the margins or changing the padding. There are other attributes as well that you can use to style those individual fields. So take the time to see what you can learn with CSS this week, and I'm looking forward to seeing your customized contact forms.